My name is Wacy Zacarias, and I'm here to talk about an imagined future where we look at textiles as part of our healing journeys. As I mentioned, my name is Wacy Zacarias, and I'm Mozambique, and I am co-founder of a brand called Garingana Textiles, and I am a designer and a sangoma. In that journey, I found a way to bring both of those into my work. My work has been since 2019 about imagining a way to bring spiritual and healing into textiles. Really, we look at cloth as kind of a portal of communication, the way that we, as Africans, understood textiles in a spiritual and a with more intention. And then this is what we've been talking about. So basically, Jamil and I, who's sitting in the audience, run two brands. We run Karingani Textiles, which is a textile design brand since 2015. And we started off just as textile storytelling and really thinking about the idea of bringing storytelling back into African textiles when we realized that most of our textiles were coming in from China, from India and Mozambique, and from Holland. And for us, that was quite shocking that we were the biggest consumer of what we call African print textile, and Ecuador wasn't producing any of it. And, this is $1 billion industry and we weren't tapping into it. So our passion was, how do we turn that around and bring back into our market? So we started up by really just telling more stories about African textiles, just educating our audience on what African textiles could be, all the other existing, because we didn't even know anything about, the mud cloths and the bogolons and the indigo cloths that the rest of Africa knew about. We just knew Capulana. And for us, Capulana was that imported textiles anyway. And we also run an accessory design brand, which is Woogie. And with that brand, we work with rural communities in Mozambique. So using indigenous materials and craft to make lachi bags. So in my personal journey, as I was saying, I started off as a designing accessories with Woogie and then on textiles. And in the middle of that, I had the calling of to be a samboma, which kind of brought me to a middle path, which I thought, because of the way it is taught to you, that I had to give up my whole design career, which I had been building for the past, 8 years, 6 years at the time, and, go into a hut in rural Mozambique and become a Samoan. And it really just broke my heart. And I was like, doesn't make any sense. And it was in the middle of COVID when we were making masks from our capulanas for clients. The Dorita line kind of sat down one day and we were like, doesn't feel right. Good. We're making masks for COVID for people to protect themselves from COVID. And we're using this textile that is totally dyed chemicals. It just doesn't seem like we're helping anybody. If you already had breathing problems and you're breathing it chemicals, that's not going to improve anything. And that's, I'm going to say a light bulb, but I want to say, I want to think that it was kind of some kind of divine inspiration that was like, oh, what if we use indigenous plants to dye the textiles? And then later in thinking about this, really was, what if we actually use medicinal plants? As a Sangoma, I had been working with medicinal plants. I'd been learning about medicinal plants. Then we started to think about the idea of translating these medicinal plants into textile and to think about how could we bring the properties of those textiles, of those plants into the textile. So using indigenous knowledge, using traditional healing, which in Mosaic is still a little bit marginalized, a little bit different than what it is in South Africa, but thinking of a way to bring that into the work that we were doing. And it was really, for us, it became something that was super exciting and passionate. And it became like our biggest research project, because it is still very much research, even self-funded. And so we started talking about using the different plants that we were using within the healing as part of our regenerative textile. So just weaving healing into the textiles. And it was really a lot about researching different plant properties, mapping out different plants in Mozambique that had that properties and were medicinal. So understanding which ones had medicinal use, and also thinking about kind of, because I think it's the same in South Africa, but in Mozambique, in the vernacular language, the name of the plant is what it does in healing. So it was like, oh, okay. So if we have a plant that is used to, I don't know, we're gonna just choose something to calm down the spirits. If I'm having an anxiety attack, right, which is kind of the spiritual attack, if you think about in African healing. If I'm wearing something, that is when I calm down the spirits, that should automatically also calm me down. So that was like kind of the thought process of some of the ways that we were blending the plants to look at the formulas of the textiles that we're making. And the way that we started doing that, because we didn't have funding, was that we started in 2019, which I don't think is a coincidence, working with different groups in rural Mozambique with artisan roots within a refugee camp in the north of Mozambique and another home in Mozambique Island. And so we decided that our research was going to be done with these groups because we didn't have money or time, as when we were running a business, to have research time. So every time I went into the field and we were teaching a group to do natural dyes, we would take the time to document the full process, to actually do tests with the group and who left the methodology and the knowledge. And our methodology was actually built in to teaching the groups. And this is how we started to build in the methodology, which is not very scientific, but um, not very scientific if you look at question way of looking at science, but very scientific if you understand indigenous knowledge as being scientific or the first scientists. Um, and so these are some of the plants that we use, and some of the products that were made from it. The image that you're seeing is a Caprona design from one of the groups in Mozambique Island. And the other pigment is from a group in the north of Mozambique in Palma, which actually make woven carpets. But if you go to the exhibition, is displayed there. And what's very interesting, and we've also dyed some textiles with it to see the effects of that. But to us, it's been interesting in understanding, because capoeira is so important in our culture. It has been interesting to teach women how to make this, and the way it changes the way that they look at this textile. Because now that it's made with their own energy and their own intention, and they understand that this can be something that transforms their lives. And so this is some of the things that we experiment with, because our whole process is very circular. So we try as much as we can to not bring anything that we have to import into that community, because we want to make sure that when we leave, they can still do the process. So usually we investigate and we spend a lot of time with the community understanding what local materials they have. Something that I borrowed from Sito Tananki, which we call material mapping. And basically, spend a lot of time building material atlas with the community, understanding what materials are there, what pigments are in that community, and how they used to dye in, if there was a dye tradition, how they used to dye in that tradition, and how we can revive it. So in this image, it's a picture from Palma, and we were teaching the woman how to make cacao with the seashells to use as emorted in the dye process. And when we were teaching them, initially they were like, "Oh, it seemed like it was something new," but then one of them was like, "Oh no, my grandmother used to do that," and I was like, "Well, of course, thin." So, really, what we're doing is to help him remember, you know, and and I'm sure most people, because we're all in that process of remembering ourselves. We all think about our own heat processes. They're really not about learning anything. They're just about remembering, because we all know and we've forgotten how to be in touch with nature and the way that we used to do things that were better for us, in the long run. And so we try as much as possible not to use any synthetic materials. So we use clay pots that are made in the community. So we usually find somebody in that community that makes the clay pots, and the woman will collect the seashells, and we'll harvest the plants. So for informal, because of, if you know anything about what's happening in Mozambique, Palma is the region that is in war right now. So we're not really allowed to go deep into the forest. We can stay in the centers. We haven't really explored that forest yet. And so it's just developing of the the heating textiles. It goes a little bit beyond just thinking of textiles as functional, but also looking at the spiritual um aspect of it. Because, if you are aware how Sangoma textiles work, there is a whole bunch of factories that make these textiles with different motifs like lions and tigers. And if you are um if you're in the learning process to be a healer, you'll usually dream of different textiles with lion motif that your spirits will require or something else. And I started to ask, well, my gods weren't really alive. And they don't really know the Indian guys that are making, no offense to them, that are making the different textiles. And yet I am dreaming about these textiles that else is making as part of my process. What if I started to reimagine the spiritual textiles in my own, whatever in my brain, and bringing them out in a different way, because it's really just about intention. So there was this whole different thing that happened, which we developed this alphabet, which is also at the exhibition, which is the spiritual alphabet, which was made based on the divination bones. So in Rosalie Bipol and Tinkrolo. And they really so it was really, because I'm a little bit obsessed with African alphabet, they really just a bunch of symbols that translate to different meanings in terms of how you can communicate with spirit. And it was also like a way of thinking, how is the new generation who are a little bit far removed from this idea of the Sangoma and going into rural area could connect to spirit in their setting. So this alphabet became that. And actually it was like a really full circle moment yesterday, because at the exhibition there was these two young people who like spent so much time with the alphabet, and I was like, yeah, if I didn't do anything else, I think the message got there. But and so these symbols also became a way that we could translate textile in a different way. And if you bring them into textile, they would start to communicate a different way of reimagining protected textile. So actually what I'm wearing was our first idea of a protective textile. And this collection was really based on when we were working in Falma, when we were working with these women in the war-torn Mozambique. We started to imagine what happens to the children and to the different generations who are being kind of cut off from the traditions, and they're being cut off from the elders. And how could we bring that connection back to them? So in two ways. So that the textile has all the drawings on it are inspired in the Makonde tattoos. And Makonde tattoos are protection tattoos that they used to make, that they put muti in it, so medicine in it, to protect the warriors when they went out into the field. So we started imagining if we could imbue this meaning into textile, then you could make a sort of protective textile that would be a protective blanket for these children in these communities. So it's just this idea that if we could think about textiles as part of our healing process, as something that we carry with us in our daily lives, and stop thinking about textiles as just something that is fashionable, that is beautiful, but it could be part of the way that we carry ourselves, And so this one specifically is with this protective intention, and also the motives are like ones, and also and call it ones, because it wasn't like every child when you were born, really you were vaccinated with like an 11 on your chest. It's part of the ritual and a quick medicine. So again, this idea of protection. So these blankets are also dyed with plants that have this energy of protection. And it's just really thinking about the energy beyond the dyes, beyond the beauty of the color, the energy that plants carry, and how that can translate into clothing.